Hey, what's up? Travis here at Books, Builds, and More, and today I'm going to be reviewing the second book of Stephen King's Dark Tower series and the second book of my own personal Dark Tower journey, The Drawing of the Three. This was a messy book for me, not in terms of chaos. It's just there was a lot going on, and there were a lot of things I liked, I disliked, and still quite a bit on the fence about. Plus, it was just a complete stark contrast to the first book. So it was a bit of a mixed bag for me and sort of this odd balance. So I'm going to try to break this down as best as I can. And just a quick note before I get started here. I usually hate doing spoilers. However, on occasion, I do reviews that I feel like I have to do minor spoilers in order to justify my thoughts on the book, and this is one of those times. One of the first things I noticed about this book was the fact that writing-wise, it was structured to play off of the tarot card reading that took place at the end of the first book. Now, normally, I'm not a huge fan of divination being used as a plot device unless it's done fairly decently. And in this case, I thought it was pretty cleverly done. The opening of this book was pretty strong. It hooks you right off the bat, where it takes place literally, or at least close to the end of the events, where Roland is on the beach and he, comes to and, has to start this journey. But not long after he wakes up or revives or whatever, he's kind of incapacitated for the majority of the rest of the novel in some brutal but very weird, odd way. But it was still pretty good. It was a strong opening, I thought, for the book. And I want to touch on Roland's character for just a split second here, because I'm going to be talking about him, I think, twice during this review. To start with, he's incapacitated, but he's starting this journey. So he has to go find these different doors up this massive beach, I guess, to start his quest for the Dark Tower. But he's supposed to be collecting these companions along the way, and I think he finds them through these doors. Well, he does. And as such, I think this kind of sets up the major players for the rest of this series that are going to be following Roland, which I thought was okay to put him on the back burner if that's what it does. In that way, this book is kind of more just an extended setup, instead of like an actual, yes, it does start the journey, but this just feels like it's not going anywhere right now. It's just part of the major setup. It's like the first book and this one are parts 1 and 2 of nothing but setup. And I think that's why a lot of people say that the third book is where things really start to jive and pick up and start to move. So that might be the reason why. I'm not sure. I could be wrong about that. That's just how I feel after reading this book. But getting back to Roland, I wasn't really particularly fond of how his character was treated. It was a complete polar opposite of the gunslinger we saw in book 1. Now he's weakened in this vulnerable state, but now as he goes through these doors, he's faced with these moments that kind of put him in this, I used this word before, but he just kind of looks buffoonish and naive in a way. Yes, he doesn't know anything about this new world, but it was just, I don't know, it just felt like Stephen King was unhappy with the character or whatnot, and just decided to kind of up it a little bit, up the stakes for him a little bit by giving him some kind of humanity to him. I don't think it was very necessary to do that in this way. I just think there were other ways, that Roland could have been handled in this book, but it is what it is. Does it make me like him anymore after this? Not by much, but I do start to see some potential with Roland in the future after this book, but I'll get back to him in a little bit. I do want to start with talking about each of these draws. The first story he finds is a guy named Eddie, who is a young man who's a heroin addict. And he's like dubbed in the tarot card reading as the prisoner. So I'm guessing that's a metaphor for his addiction. He's a prisoner of his addiction. But Roland kind of kidnaps him. I call him BS on that one, because I think Eddie pretty much volunteered to go because he's lost everything in the world. And so he just kind of goes with Roland. So I think I'm calling BS on that. I think it's like maybe half kidnapping, but half, consent to go. But regardless, Eddie, I like the character right now, but I definitely like him better than Roland, not by much, but for now, until he does something to really shine on his own, he's just nothing more at the moment than just the typical sidekick caricature and a quite possibly slightly older substitute for Jake for Roland. At I don't know. Eddie's just going to have to prove me wrong. I'm kind of getting a Larry Underwood vibe from him, though, like Larry Underwood from The Stand, who it started out kind of unpleasant character, but by the end of that book, Larry was one of, if not the favorite character for me from that book. So I think Eddie has potential in that way. I hope so. And the second draw, oh, good Lord. Odetta and Detta. Yeah. Okay, this was a far more intriguing character, I gotta say. There are a lot of layers to this character, and I'm going to try not to say too much because there is a major spoiler with this character, especially toward the end of the book. So I'm just going to leave it at that and say that I do like this character. I like her a lot. I'm really looking forward to see what kind of interesting ways she's going to play out in this series. And now we come to the third draw, which actually encompasses the entire last third of the book. And this is where Roland really steps up his game for me in this. There's a huge twist to this last draw. It's not what you expect it to be. And there's just so much that happens. This was by far my favorite part of the book, was this entire last third, because the stakes really amped up. There were some major twists. Some things happened that are going to maybe alter certain things further in the series. Something that we've seen before gets altered, and I think that might vindicate a hunch I had from the gunslinger from the first book. We'll wait and see how it is. But I started liking Roland. Like, a lot of what he was going through in the beginning that kind of made him look naive and buffoonish, as I said before, it kind of came together in this third part. There was a lot of humor in this book. I was not expecting that. However, I had to kind of take a step back and reserve judgments again on this, because I had to keep in mind that, yes, this is a fantasy series, but it's not just strictly fantasy. And a lot of people have, said that this is a multi-genre adventure. The Dark Tower series is. So I had to keep that in mind, because the entire first book felt half Western, half fantasy. This one is more like, it played out like there's a ton of action. I mean, this is like nonstop. And that's another thing I liked about this book, is there was very little downtime in this book. So yeah, it played out as kind of like an action film, but the comedy just kind of fell flat a lot. I mean, some of it was good, some of it, but the rest. But also, there's a lot of like background information here. I think when Roland got incapacitated, it was done in the way to kind of introduce us to these other major characters that are being set on this chessboard for the rest of the series, so that they could have their time to shine and that we could meet them and know where they come from. And I didn't mind hearing their backstories, but a lot of times in the backstories, I just felt like it could have benefited from a huge trim down. A lot of stuff in this book really could have been snipped. So this book has been quite a balance for me, but there are still some unanswered questions here. There are some things that provided new questions for along the way. So I think that was pretty cool, because, for example, one of the unanswered questions is, unless I blinked and missed it somewhere, I'm not quite sure what Roland's true motivation, like why is he on the search for this Dark Tower? Like, what is exactly his motive for doing it? We know that he's on the mission from the start of the first book, and because we learn about his obsession over it, but we don't understand why, or at least I don't right now. Again, unless I'm actually overlooked it somewhere between The Gunslinger and this book. I think that's still one of the questions that has to be answered along the way. But right now, like I said a few minutes earlier, I feel like this book is just extended setup to really actually technically start the actual journey, like the actual adventure can actually go on now. Not that this wasn't adventurous enough. There were a lot of things in this book that, I mean, a lot of action in this book. I was really happy about that. And it was it was just such a complete 180 from the first book. Not that that's a bad thing, it just felt very odd. And not saying that that's bad either. I'm just saying that for me, I feel like this is just a really different kind of opening to a series, you know, more than any other series I've ever read before. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this plays out. So far, I still like The Gunslinger better. I gave this book 3.75 stars. Yeah, it was just below a 4-star read for me. But just above middle of the road. I may end up changing that one depending on how the series progresses, just like I plan to do with The Gunslinger. I'm still going to make the decision at the end of my Dark Tower journey to reread The Gunslinger at the end and see if that changes the rating for that book. But yeah, so far, Gunslinger, still better. This one, not bad, but not... yeah, I'm just going to have to wait and see. This one's just kind of, no pun intended, because it's based on a tarot card reading, but this is a wild card for me right now. And because this is the second book of my personal Dark Tower extended reading journey, now that that one's done, the next book I had in the original order of this was The Stand. That would have been my next book to go to in my personal journey with this. But since I've read The Stand before, I will be putting that one aside because I already know everything about that story. And I went straight into The Eyes of the Dragon. And I'm flying through this book. I'm already halfway through it. And I will probably be doing my next review of this one, obviously. So, yeah, look for that pretty soon. And so for now, that's all I have for The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King. If you've stuck with me this long, I thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on my next stop along my Dark Tower journey.